Welcome to another edition of 310 to Left, brought to you by your New England Ford dealers and F-Series, America's best-selling truck for 48 years and the official truck of the Boston Red Sox. Tom Caron along with Alex Speier, and we've got news. Earlier this week, Garrett Crochet locked up for the foreseeable future, a 6-year extension, opt-out after the 5th year. It begins officially in 2026. A pig fest, as Lou Merlone would say. Loves to call him the pig, right? Because he's filthy. Well, now you can fire up the roast, and we're going to be talking about Craig Crochet for a long time to come. A bit of a surprise, Alex Speier, right? Because Crochet had said, I don't want this to go into the season. We had heard that they got very close. Well, apparently they got close enough that Crochet and the Red Sox felt comfortable continuing the conversation and ultimately getting it done after his first start with the Red Sox.
Yeah, pretty fascinating dynamics, because I think that going out of Fort Myers, we all expected, and it seemed like Garrett Crochet expected, that there was not going to be a deal happening, right? But you're absolutely right. The deadline, the quote unquote deadline of the start of the regular season, led to seemingly more aggressive movements in terms of how the two sides were approaching things. It is worth noting, this was not an easy extension to find common ground on, by virtue of the fact that Garrett Crochet has been a starting pitcher for so little time. Right? Even though he was only 2 years away from free agency, a guy in what we call the 4+ service class, meaning more than 4 years, fewer than 5 of major league service time. Free agency arrives at 6 years. He'd only thrown 224 innings, 219 as of opening day, which is basically unheard of for a starting pitcher who's that close to free agency, both because he'd been a reliever and because he'd missed a lot of time due to injury. But he'd been so electric, like elite electric, that he also represented a guy who, if he gets to free agency, you're talking about, and if he built upon what he did last year, you're talking about a guy who, where the Garrett Cole, the Yamamoto type money of $35 million a year on the open market is very much within reach. And so because of that, you're dealing with a lot of difficulty finding the common ground. So it took a little bit longer than anyone expected, but lo and behold, it does appear that the relationship was strong enough on both sides that they were able to get to say, you know what, we can move a little bit beyond that opening day deadline.
And the common ground seems to be pretty common, right? I mean, they seem to have, if you look at it, it's not a breaking type deal for the team, right? I wouldn't say it's team friendly, but it is a team acceptable deal. And for Crochet, he cashes in, as you pointed out, after essentially 1 year as a starter, and with the opt-out, will be a little bit older than Max Fried was when he got his deal, but not a lot. It's kind of in that same ballpark, right? So he leaves his options for one bigger mega deal on the back end of this, wherever we are in the CBA and the world of Major League Baseball, 5-6 years from now. But it does seem to be a deal that is good for the player and good for the team. They worked out a mutually agreeable deal that both sides should be happy with, right?
There's upside for both sides and there's risk for both sides, right? Because, again, Crochet could have been in position with a couple more healthy years for being in that kind of 9 and 360 range, right? But if he's injured, then he also could have been at risk of being in maybe or if he hadn't been able to repeat the dominance, then maybe he's looking at a 2 or 3 year deal for far less than that. And for the Red Sox as well, there is the upside of being able to get a guy well less than that 9 and 360 type of deal. But you also, there is also the question of, okay, is he going to be able to repeat this? Is he going to be able to build out the number of innings that he has? So it's exactly right. Like both sides have pretty significant risk and both sides have pretty considerable upside. But for the Red Sox, as we know, the skew of their young talent has been towards position players for quite a while. And so for them being able to identify a guy who has demonstrated top of the rotation, not just potential, but performance, and be able to say, you know what, we're going to be able to get him for his remaining prime years. Sign him up. That 6-year deal covers his age 27 to 32 seasons. If he opts out, it's 27 to 31. That's pretty darn good. And we know we're still trying to figure out the particulars of the deal. We know that the last year would be worth roughly $30 million that age 31 season that he can opt out of. Or age 32 season he can opt out of. So, there's clearly a discount there for them relative to what Crochet is trying to position himself for on the open market.
It also takes the conversation away now that, they gave away 4 prospects for 2 years of a pitcher. Right now, you can look at the deal in totality and say they traded away 4 prospects. We'll see what that all equals, but they dipped into the top end of their prospect pool for a 25-year-old pitcher that they now have control for 6 or 7 years, right? That is the deal now, and it certainly makes you feel a lot better, I think, if you're the Red Sox about giving out the prospect capital because you now have the pitcher for as long as you do. A very different story if he'd have left after 2 years.
Yeah, well, let's think about precedent, right? Because the fact that they acquired Crochet at 25 makes this deal most similar to the ones that they did for a guy named Pedro Martinez, right? When they traded for him from the Expos, trading 2 very high-end prospects at the time, as well as the deal for Josh Beckett, mostly Josh Beckett, as well as, by the way, Mike Lowell, when they traded away Hanley Ramirez and Anibal Sanchez in order to acquire him. In both of those cases, they not only traded for them, but signed them 2 extensions before they were eligible for free agent, before they would have been eligible for free agency, and that gave them anchors for the long haul. For those deals spanned all of those guys' kind of late 20s seasons when they were kind of at the peak of their physical abilities, combined with an advancing knowledge of how to pitch, and the results were pretty darn good in both cases. So that's what they're hoping for.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. World Series MVP Mike Lowell, the throw-in of that Josh Beckett. Not bad. Not a bad throw-in. Not a bad throw-in. All right. Enough about us talking about it. Let's hear from the man who got the deal done. Craig Breslow, Chief Baseball Officer of the Boston Red Sox. Perfect time to get him on to talk about a number of things, but beginning with the Garrett Crochet deal that was announced earlier this week. So let's get right to it. We'll talk about it after. It's the Chief Baseball Officer of the Boston Red Sox. It's Craig Breslow on 310 to Left, presented by your New England Ford dealers. Craig Breslow, Chief Baseball Officer of the Boston Red Sox, is with us. And Craig, we spent a lot of this time at spring training talking about locking up players for the future. The big news this week is that you have done that with Garrett Crochet. Talk a little about how this deal came together, how it extended into the season, and how that didn't become an exit ramp, how you were able to get this done even though he had already made a start.
Yeah, so obviously when we acquired Garrett, we did so with this idea that the team, the rotation could benefit from someone who could pitch at the top, who could anchor the rotation, and obviously he's a guy that had a great year last year as a starting pitcher, but I think more than some of the obvious stuff was just how much swing and miss he was able to generate, the consistency of the stuff throughout the season. And, at 25 years old, we feel like his prime is still in front of him. And so he was someone that we were very interested in securing and making a long-term commitment to. And these conversations have gone on for months now. And, there were times where we felt like we were really close and other times where we felt like we were miles apart. But I think we owe a huge thank you to Garrett, to Rachel, to our ownership group, making the commitment, and to Garrett, Rachel, for having the trust in the Red Sox in the direction that we're heading, and in making this a place that they want to be. And I know I've talked about how anytime the Red Sox have been in a position to this ownership group, John, Tom, Mike, Sam, have supported aggressive moves to ensure that the window of contention was as wide open as it could possibly be, and could extend as long as possible. I think this is another piece of evidence toward that.
You say that there were times when you felt like you were miles apart. Was that as recent as into the season, right? Because Garrett had made clear that he wanted to. He was very interested in pursuing the possibility of a long-term deal, but he wanted to be able to focus on the season once the season arrived. So, yeah, was there, even in Texas, did it feel like this was not a thing that was going to happen? And if so, what changed?
Yeah, so the conversations were always respectful and productive, and I, the position that Garrett was in. At the same time, it seems as though he appreciated the organization, the brief amount of time that he had spent in Boston through the offseason, the direction that this organization is heading, and how competitive we should be given the emergence of the young core position players. And it's true. Approaching opening day, I was not confident that there was a deal to be had, at least in this go around of conversations. And I was very mindful of the deadline that Garrett set, and did not want this to become a distraction through the season. But I don't know if it was stubbornness or relentlessness or what it was, but we continued to push, and ultimately we were able to get something across the finish line that seems like it can be a win for both sides.
So I'm curious about that, right? When there is a deadline, when one side says, I'd like to get this done by now, is it a case of you feel you're so close? Is it a conversation that was happening before the deadline that if we're within a certain yardage of the end zone, we can keep pushing on this? Like, how does the dance before getting a deal done, how does that take place? And how did you decide you could get this done even though that deadline had passed?
Yeah, I'm not sure there's a playbook for these things. I think you have to try and react to each individual situation. In this case, I think each side had made a move toward trying to find a deal, but we were not lining up. And opening day and Garrett's opening day start came and went, and I think both sides were prepared to table the conversations, save for one more kind of return to the negotiating seat. And I think the one thing that a deadline does is it starts to draw out a more realistic look at positions, and kind of gives each side maybe a little bit more of a chance to kind of peek behind the curtain and say, where can we get this done? And when you have two parties who are genuinely and authentically interested in reaching an outcome that satisfies both, knowing that there's some give and take here, I think that's when you have a chance to get something done. And I think you have to be respectful of deadlines. You have to be you have to acknowledge what these types of conversations can mean for a player who's trying to compete in a really, really competitive sport. But at the same time, we felt like this was an opportunity to continue to push the conversation and see if we couldn't get it finished.
Alex Bregman said about 30 to 40 minutes before that deal was done, he didn't think he was coming to Boston. As you have grown in the executive side of this business, and as you've grown into this role, do you still find yourself, like, within the hour of getting a deal done, being like Alex Bregman was, unsure that, is it that, do you always feel like, oh, we're right there, or is it a case of you don't know until you know?
Yeah, I'm not sure until you know. There are plenty of scenarios I can recall where within an hour I was pretty confident we were getting a player, and that didn't happen. But nobody really talks about that because nobody really knows the other side of it. I think what we have to do is we have to understand how particular players may fit our roster and what we're trying to build, and we have to be decisive and aggressive in trying to bring them in. And we have to do that all the while understanding that players can make decisions for any number of reasons, and we can put our best foot forward and simply not line up.
After the Bregman deal, we saw, the picture of John Henry smoking a cigar. Is there a Craig Breslow meme that's going to go around? Like, what's your victory lap?
No, I'm not sure that there is, outside of feeling like we have a legitimate number one starter, someone who can pitch at the top of our rotation for a long time, and we feel like There are still development opportunities. I'm super excited. He's super excited to work with Andrew and the rest of our pitching infrastructure. And, when we look back, hopefully a run of success that will be indicative of making a great decision for both sides.
It is interesting to take broader stock of the idea of an extension, a long-term deal for a young global player who's going to be ages 27 to 31 seasons for the life of this contract, or 26 to 31. There's the Braves have obviously created a culture of extensions where it seems like there's just this momentum that builds, where one young player after another wants to line up and have a long-term deal that makes sense for the club, that gives them cost certainty. You guys have also increasingly had an emphasis on signing young players over the course of prime years, right? Like whether it's a Rafael, whether it's a Bayo. How would you describe the importance of these types of long-term deals for younger players in terms of longer range vision of team building?
Yeah, so I think it's an important, it's even a critical pillar of long-term sustainability of our strategy to compete for World Series year after year. And, that recipe has long been a combination of homegrown talent that we can build around, supplemented by trades and free agent acquisitions. And I see no reason to reinvent that. Now, that being said, I think, it becomes a testament to so many different people when young players want to sign up for staying in one place and for staying particularly in Boston for, the bulk of their career. It starts with our scouting department and the relationships that are built there. It moves on to the player development system and, creating the environment where players recognize that they're invested in and they can improve and get better in this organization, and then aligning with the longer term direction and strategy of the major league team in terms of sustainability and the ability to compete in the postseason year after year. I mean, every player who makes it to the major leagues is supremely competitive and seeks winning. Often above all else. And so many things have to go right to create an organization where players want to stay here. And the willingness of guys like Bayo and Zidane and Garrett and Whitlock before I got here, I think that shows that we're absolutely moving in the right direction.
Which, right, Kristian Campbell obviously fits right into that. Reports over the weekend that there were conversations going on. I know you won't take us into those conversations. I've learned enough not to ask those questions. But are you engaged? Is that something that could continue during the course of the season?
Yeah, I mean, we have conversations, with the representation for players that we think could fit, what I just described in terms of players who, feel like the organization and the Red Sox are a franchise that they want to commit to, and also that we can find, very, very strong merit in committing to ourselves. And sometimes those conversations are very, very productive, and other times the timing doesn't line up. Kristian had mentioned that we've been engaged. It's hard to know exactly where that goes, but we're incredibly excited that he is going to be a part of this organization for a really long time, and 5 games is not a sample that you want to draw too many conclusions from, but I think his ability to make adjustments and adapt has suited him very, very well, even dating back to his college career. And we've seen just how quickly he's been able to acclimate to the speed of the major league game.
Organizations are always happy and excited when young players thrive, but he's a guy who in a lot of ways represents a lot of what this organization is about, right? He bought into a lot of the ideas. He bought in a lot of the off-season work. How gratifying is it for the organization to see a guy who gets the opportunity get the results as quickly as he has? It doesn't mean he will every day, but he's hit the ground running after putting in a lot of work. That's got to be gratifying.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, he is exemplary of this intersection of scouting and development and kind of major league performance, again, albeit in a very, very small sample, just in terms of identifying some underlying characteristics that we believed could be enhanced in the organization, of Kristian committing to just an incredible amount of work, spending the offseason in Fort Myers, 2 years now, and kind of leaning into the development initiatives that were introduced to him, and then continuing development in Major League spring training as he's trying to make a team, and so far, a week or so into a Major League season, and as much as excited as we absolutely should be about Kristian, he's not the only example, of those types of successes. And in order for us to accomplish what we hope to, which is to be able to contend for the World Series year after year, we need to make sure that we continue to replenish this talent pipeline as guys matriculate to the big leagues.
So speaking of matriculators, you also have a couple of promising players in AAA right now. Marcelo Meyer was pretty clear about how he had a great camp. I think objectively, like, you were there for Jackie Bradley Jr. in 2013. Mm-hmm. Like, to me, I thought that Meyer had a better camp this year than Jackie did, and that's saying a lot. What does, Marcelo Meyer wants to be in the big leagues. Roman Anthony wants to be in the big leagues. What do they have to do to be in the big leagues? And was there ever a thought was there ever a question about Meyer versus Campbell for the opening day roster?
There were questions throughout spring about the right way to build the roster. And I think the opening day roster is magnified because of the celebration and the excitement about that first game. But in reality, it is one of 162, and rosters change very, very quickly. But kind of getting back to Marcelo, he was certainly in the conversation. As were a handful of other guys. Vaughn was obviously in camp with us for nearly the entirety of camp, and Sogard and his versatility was something that left a strong impression on us. But in terms of what Marcelo could come into camp and show, I think most importantly, he showed he was healthy. He showed just how smooth of a defender he could be. It didn't matter if we put him at shortstop, second base, third base. It just seemed like the game never sped up on him. And then we saw the offensive upside. So, I think while I'm sure Marcelo is disappointed that he didn't make our opening day roster, I have quite a bit of confidence that he's going to impact our team. In the fact that he is completely healthy, he can go down to Worcester and he can get every day at bats and continue on his development is really the most important thing right now. But when you talk about Marcelo and Roman and Kristian, we are incredibly excited about having all three of those guys in the organization.
The fact that you did choose Campbell obviously gives you another right-handed bat in the lineup. Bregman does the same, right? Like, there was, you were intentional and you were explicit about the idea that you wanted to add more right-handed, more right-handed balance to the lineup this offseason. So along those lines, it's worth asking as we sit and get ready for the home opener this year, how much was lineup strategy, lineup balance? How much was that wrapped around the question of, hey, how do we claim a home field advantage at Fenway? Something that hasn't happened a lot over the course of recent years in Red Sox history.
Yeah, well, we are very aware of the park factors that contribute to kind of Fenway's the uniqueness of Fenway and the skew and favor that right-handed hitters who can hit the ball in the air to the pull side can bring. And so we had Tyler O'Neill, of course, last year, in his 31 home runs, many of which did go over the monster. And we needed to ensure that not only did we have balance in terms of not being so vulnerable to left-handed pitching, but also taking advantage of where we play 81 games. And so I talked about it in Alex Bregman's introductory press conference that his offensive profile fits our park really, really well. And then Kristian obviously gives us another right-handed bat, but also a right-handed bat that we feel can be pretty platoon neutral. He's hit both righties and lefties throughout his short minor league career, and also his ability to use the whole field. He's not maybe the prototypical kind of right-handed pull hitter, but we do feel like he's talented enough to impact the game. So, we saw it in facing, Povich in Baltimore, where we could run out a right-handed hitter at first base to get Romy Gonzalez's bat in there, and at second base with Kristian and Trevor at shortstop, and Ref in right, and Sedan in center, and Connor behind the plate. So all of a sudden, this left-handed skew that we talked about for a while was in fact mitigated by a couple pretty impactful hitters.
It's the home opener, but it's also interesting that it comes against the Cardinals, right? Like it's pretty well documented that you guys were engaged with the Cardinals over the course of the offseason in trade talks involving Arenado, and that Arenado made very clear his interest in coming to the Red Sox. I suppose it's worth stepping back and you were interested not only in improving the offense at home, the team at home, but also in upgrading the infield defense, which led to conversations about multiple third basemen. You signed Bregman, and again there was the Arenado question. Does that, given that interest, was there a world in which you would have had discussions with Rafi earlier in the offseason about the positional question and about which direction you were taking the team? Just given, you've talked many times about what he means to the organization. Would it have made more sense to have kind of had those conversations explicitly earlier in the offseason rather than focusing them chiefly after a player was added?
You try to balance so many different elements anytime you think about what is best for an organization and what is best for any individual player. And there were so many different outcomes and so many moving pieces that could have necessitated certain conversations and could have rendered certain conversations moot. And so I think, operating from a position of certainty to the extent possible is typically what allows you to be the most straightforward and forthright and truthful. When we signed Alex, we signed this offensive profile that fit our park, and we signed what we knew was going to be an elite defender, and exactly how those pieces were going to come together. We needed to kind of wait and see, and the conversations that I had with Rafi, that we had with Rafi, I think it is appropriate to keep those between us. But at the end of the day, we saw Rafi come forward and say that he was putting the team and putting winning, and that is all you can ask for from anybody on a roster, especially your superstar. And I have no doubt that we're going to look up and Rafi's going to have another incredibly productive offensive season. He's going to help us win a bunch of games.
It is, you're right. Like he both has exhibited he's come to the idea that he wants to see this team win, and he wants to be a part of that, right? And he's expressed confidence that it's coming. That said, one other part of his offseason that I think maybe has gone, we didn't really take stock of, how serious were the shoulder injuries really? I don't think that any of us realized that coming into camp he wouldn't have been swinging for most of the offseason, and kind of where he was in his buildup. Did you guys have a clear sense over the course of the offseason about what the implications might be in terms of his buildup and readiness for the start of the season?
Yeah, I mean, his the shoulder injuries were serious enough, obviously, that they that they led him to the IL last year, and we saw the impact that had on on his production down the stretch. And then the most important thing this offseason was for him to rest and then strengthen the shoulders. And he did both of those things. And he was very diligent in ensuring that the shoulders had the kind of requisite strength needed to go through a full season and swing with just the level of aggression that we know Rafi swings the bat with. And, it was most important that Rafi was completely healthy and uninhibited when he picked up a bat, rather than picking up a bat a little bit too early and then running into some of the same problems. And so if that meant that, he got a little bit of a late start to spring training as he kind of felt through some things in terms of timing and swing mechanics, then, I think we have to accept that. And again, I think we're going to look up here very, very shortly, and Rafi is going to be doing things that Rafi and maybe only Rafi can do. But there's no doubt that the health of his shoulders impacted his offseason. But as we sit here today, he is completely healthy.
Okay, I know it's been a really busy couple of days for you. We appreciate the time. Before we let you go, though, I have to ask the most important question in baseball today. Is there talk of bringing the Torpedo bats into the Boston Red Sox clubhouse?
Yeah, so we had a handful of guys actually swing them in spring training, but I guess it turns out if you don't hit multiple home runs, then it doesn't become a topic of conversation. So maybe it's luck, maybe it's coincidence, but my guess is we will start to see them more and more as guys swing them and have success. Like anything else, it's really, really hard to maintain a competitive advantage, given that everyone analyzes everything that everyone else is doing.
All right, and I got a suggestion before you go. I know you get this, you get suggestions from every Red Sox fan on the street. So I know you're always on the cutting edge, and I've been doing some work behind the scenes looking. William Abreu had the gastrointestinal thing, and he had a 2-home-run game. Mookie Betts, violently sick, had a 2-home-run game. Roman Anthony had the stomach thing, had a 2-home-run game in Worcester. Is there any thought of introducing, spoiled food into the clubhouse? Because there seems to be a correlation between stomach illness and multiple home run games. I'm just offering this for you in case you guys haven't hit on this yet.
No, I'm not sure how the medical staff would appreciate that, but anything to win games. So we'll pick it around and see where we land on.
There you go. We appreciate the visit. Yeah. Well, you did. The trip to Mexico was a step in that direction, but we all got through it okay. Craig, we appreciate the visit. I know it's been very busy. Looking forward to seeing you on opening day. Congrats on the extension with Crochet, and here's to bringing baseball back to Fenway. Can't wait.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
So the medical staff probably isn't going to buy into my correlation. I think you should dive into this a little more, though, Alex. The correlation between norovirus and multi-home run games is real. I'm telling you, you heard it here first.
That's a very interesting theory, Tom, and I'm glad that you are not in our medical profession.
I didn't get a laugh out of the Mexico trip. Was an attempt towards getting us there, but again, Monterey was fine.
Monterey was great. Like, it wasn't just fine. It was great. And there were it was great. I will also point out, Tom, that unfortunately there is a countervailing history when you look at what happened to, for instance, Trevor Story in 2022 when he dropped about 15 pounds in April, and in 2024 when Vaughn Grissom dropped about 15 pounds over the course of his stomach bug. That did not go particularly well for either of them, unfortunately. So your theory of making America sick is in making Major Leaguers sick. This is not really going to
Making baseball sick again, not a platform I expected to run on, but here we are. The Torpedo bats. Before we get back to Craig Breslow, I got to get you're a man of science. Torpedo bats. Will they take over the baseball world?
I think that we're about to see a lot of experimentation in the bat world. We've already had, you had seen an increasing number of players
Right.
going down to like the Marucci factory or wherever in order to get fitted, in order to get custom fitted for different bats. We had seen Mookie Betts introducing the axe handle bat that kind of ended up spreading around baseball because Mookie was awesome, and so everyone was like, "Oh, I want his bat." Well, guess what? Mookie could probably swing like a 2x4, and it would look and still hit 300 with 25 plus bombs. But we are in the middle of a period of this is going to accelerate the number of players who are open to adjusting the kinds of bats that they're willing to swing. It is also interesting to note the Red Sox actually have on their coaching staff someone who was intimately familiar with the Yankees torpedo bat project. Dylan Lawson is now a Red Sox assistant hitting coach. He was the director of hitting in big league hitting coach for the Yankees from 2021 through 2023, through the middle of the 2023 season, and working with Aaron Leonhardt, who was the guy for the Yankees who was in charge of the bat design, where they ultimately found their way to the torpedo bat. And it's worth noting that they didn't just move the barrel; they were also trying to make the barrel larger, because when you think about changing the average barrel size, this is what Dylan Lawson told me, is about 2.45 inches. So if you're able to broaden it out to the limits, 2.61 inches, well, you're creating an extra sixth of an inch to be able to make contact. In an era of swing and miss, if you can design a bat that's not going to shatter all over the place when you do that, that's pretty interesting. And the Yankees aren't the only team that's been interested in that. The Orioles have been working on bat alterations for a while. Their design is more subtle, I think, but they have guys who are swinging with barrels that are kind of unconventional. So yeah, we're going to be seeing more of this. And I'm just waiting for kind of the wiffle ball bats with the super wide barrels to come out somewhere. Maybe MLB will eliminate the barrel limitations altogether.
Well, you gotta counter with something, right? I mean, the kick change is taking, the sweeper took off. Pitchers are always coming out with new pitches. It's only a matter of time where batters will start to come out with new bats to compete against those new pitches. Let's get back to the important stuff of that Breslow conversation. Crochet locked up, conversations with Kristian Campbell going on. We've watched the rebuild over the last 6 years. Now we're starting to watch not just the guys getting here, but the guys getting locked up, right? This is going back to 2013 to 2018, right? Where you identify the core players, you lock them up, and you try to build what Ben Cherington called the next great era of Red Sox baseball. Are we on the precipice of that?
Well, I think that's to be determined, right? Like, because the interesting thing is that their reaction to that 2013 to 2018 wave of talent, which they did not sign. They did not sign a lot of early long-term extensions, and that's something that they've come to regret. And so now we're seeing them signing a growing number of early career long-term extensions that come with a greater degree of risk, whether it is a Cedar Rafaela or a Brian who barely have, who have very minimal service time in the game, or a Garrett Crochet who has very little experience as a starting pitcher, signing him to a long-term deal. You're seeing them take on identifying players with cornerstone talent, if not fully cemented track records that make them that makes forecasting them hugely that takes out the variables of forecasting their futures. You're seeing them take more swings in identifying players who they want to be cornerstones and in securing them for the long haul. So yes, there is a chance that this ends up being the foundation, that these end up being foundation players who are around for a long period of time of success, bridging different periods of Red Sox success. But again, there's also risk associated with that because of the career stages when they're signing these guys too.
Well, that's the point, right? I'm glad you brought up Atlanta in the conversation with Craig, and you had that 13 to 18 run. They did not lock those guys up. You had a window, and it slammed shut on the back end. Is that what they are trying to avoid? Are they trying to follow the Atlanta? I mean, time will tell, right? But we've seen Atlanta. At one point, you looked a year ago, and they were locked up at almost every position for years to come. That's, security that fruit teams have. Could the Red Sox follow that? Because we know they have the bumper crop of prospects coming up.
Yeah, I mean, I really do think that there's something to be said for kind of cultures of extensions. We saw the grandfather of that strategy is John Hart with Cleveland in the early 1990s, when all of a sudden, out of nowhere, they started signing guys like Carlos Baerga and Albert Bell and others to long-term deals when they barely had any service time, and everyone was like, "What's going on here?" And then all of a sudden, copycat league, we started seeing that. And part of the benefit of that is that not only do you start getting the guys, but other people who are their teammates are like, "Oh, they look really happy signing these long-term deals." We saw it with the Red Sox in the early 2000s, when you had Dustin Pedroia and Kevin Youkilis and John Lester and Clay Buchholz all signing long-term deals in rapid succession, and that ended up being critical because even through periods of struggle, right? Like they won the World Series in 2007. It looked like it might be a dynasty. It didn't end up happening that way. They had to rebuild a lot of that club, but then you still had a lot of those anchors around in 2013, right? Pedroia, Lester, Buchholz ended up being, part of that, part of those pillars, who ended, not to mention a guy named Ortiz, who signed a number of extensions, ended up kind of allowing the team to bridge between different periods of success. So when you do that, you create more buy-in from young players, right? Like if Kristian Campbell signs up for the long haul, I'm sure that he'll be talking with Marcelo Meyer and Roman Anthony about about their views on doing such things, right? So there is there's a feedback loop that occurs that could be very beneficial for the Red Sox long-term outlook.
The final question in all of that, at least for me, is the pending CBA, right? This one more year under the current collective bargaining agreement. At this point, I think most people would say there is a better than not chance that there is some sort of work stoppage, or if not a work stoppage, a drastic change in what is collectively bargained. Right? It looks for all the world that ownership across the game wants some sort of salary cap and or salary floor. The players don't want that. Point being, the middle of these deals now, as they extend out, could be changed by a massive restructuring of the CBA. When I was doing the Bruins full in 2000, or it was 2004, they lost a full season, right, in a work stoppage. And when it came back, the Bruins, I think, had 4 players under contract because Harry Sinnen believed that basically there would be this flood of free agency because nobody would lock up anybody and you'd be able to almost be like a fantasy draft and go get whoever you want. Didn't work out that way. Most teams went the other way and locked up guys before that CBA. How does something like that factor into this? Does the prospective new CBA after the 26th season change how teams look at long-term extensions?
Yeah, well, it's particularly interesting for the guys who would be eligible for free agency after the 2026 season. Oh, by the way, Garrett Crochet would have been a free agent after the 2026 season. So, yeah, I do think that there's a change in dynamics, right? Maybe it's more guys reaching for long-term deals that include significant signing bonuses in the next couple of years. Certainly, that's a possibility. I think that the dynamics could go any number of ways, and no one knows what way that will assume. I mean, yes, there's going to be talk about a salary cap. On the part of ownership interest in introducing that. There is literally with every labor dispute always at least some kind of a floated kind of thought bubble floated out there about a salary cap. Last time around, even though there was a work stoppage, the conversations about a salary cap were recognized to be so devastating to the possibility of having a normal baseball season that they were quickly set aside. But we'll see whether or not the appetite has changed on ownership. But yes, Tom, I think that you're absolutely right that there are some really strange variables that are going to be introduced into the dynamics of negotiation. So yeah, you might see some guys willing to chase after long-term financial stability before that chaos is introduced. And then other guys might say, but on the other side of whatever work stoppage happens, typically, like there can be boom time on the far side of any kind of work stoppage. So, no idea. We have no idea.
Thing about the unknown is it is unknown. So there you go. That's my
Well,
deep
known
philosophical
unknowns,
thought
are they known
for the day.
unknowns, unknown unknowns, right? We have to distinguish between our categories, our epistemological categories, Tom. That's what we
Yeah,
do on
well,
Torpedo.
I think there is. Yeah, that's what we do on 310 to Left. We explore the unknown, and that way we can never be pinned down on being wrong because it's unknown. So there
Next
you go.
episode,
That's my. That's the way we wrap it up.
yeah.
We have a friend. Have you ever been? Tangentially, has nothing to do with anything. Have you ever been to the Cryptozoology Museum in Portland, Maine?
Why no, Tom? I haven't. Why ever would you bring up Portland, Maine?
You really should. Well, because it's the greatest city, anywhere. Home of the Hearts of Pine, who are undefeated as we speak. But the Cryptozoology Museum, and cryptozoology is the mythical creatures, right? Like
Yeah.
the Loch Ness monster and Yeti and Sasquatch and all those things. And Lauren Coleman is the director. I always thought that was the greatest job in the world because you are the foremost authority on things that are unknown, that cannot be proven. Like it's sort of like being a sportscaster. You want to be the foremost authority, but never be pinned down by facts. So there you go. That's why I like to explore the unknown.
Okay, Tom. We expect your the next podcast to be on mythology.
We'll get a deep dive on Sasquatch. We'll get Dustin Pedroia back to talk about Sasquatch. Huge Sasquatch guy. He's been chasing him for a long time. So, all right, there we go. Great stuff today, and good get. That was Alex Speier's job of landing Craig Breslow. So well done, Alex. Timely as always.
Well, I would. I think that we should just both be grateful that he decided to accommodate our request, not only by appearing but by signing an extension, so we could have a very interesting conversation.
That's why we pushed it off. Yeah, exactly right. All right, we'll do it again.
If you were let's pause on this. What mythical creature would Garrett Crochet be? Because he is a physical giant, like this 6'6", 250 dude, and like he seems like he's crying for a nickname, right? Like someone with that, with that kind of like physical scale deserves to have a title. What do you got, Tom?
Well, again, Merlone sort of staked the claim of the pig, and he's talked to Garrett about it, and Garrett enjoys all the pig talk. So I think it's got to be something based on that, Big Swine, but that's not a great nickname. You don't want to go through life being Big Swine, We'll have to figure out Wild Hog. I don't know. But Lou's got it started, so I think it's got to be down that vein. I don't want to undercut the hard work Lou has done in branding Pig Day, as he likes to call Garrett Crochet starts.
It's a great point. We would not want to undermine the great work that Lou Merlone has done over time on this one.
Yes. Okay. On that point, we'll be back with more unknown thoughts next week. We do know that much. For Alex Speier, I'm Tom Caron. Thanks so much for checking out this edition of 310 to Left, presented by your New England Ford dealers, the official truck of the Boston Red Sox. We'll see you again next time.